Tel Aviv, Israel, 1972. A facility that doesn't appear on any public map. The Mossad's Advanced Combat Training Center, hidden in plain sight behind the cover of a private security consulting firm. The building is unremarkable from the outside. 3 stories of concrete and glass in an industrial district. Nothing suggests that inside, Israel's most elite intelligence operatives learn to kill. This is where Avi Cohen works. Not his real name. His real name is classified, but his reputation within Israeli intelligence is real enough. Former Sayeret Matkal. 8 years of field operations across hostile territories. He helped develop the curriculum for what the world would later know as Krav Maga, the Israeli close combat system built on one foundational principle. In real combat, there are no rules, only survival. Avi is 38 years old, 5'11", 195 pounds. His body is a precision instrument built for ending threats quickly. He's been in more real fights than most military veterans. Not training scenarios, not controlled exercises. Real situations where failure meant death. His hands have scars from encounters that will never appear in any report. He believes in Krav Maga with the conviction of someone who has tested it against reality. Not theory, not demonstrations, real combat. The system works because it was built from real encounters, refined through real failures, perfected through real necessity. Every technique answers a specific question. How do you neutralize a threat in the shortest time possible? The connection between Bruce Lee and Mossad came through unexpected channels. An American intelligence liaison named Daniel Kaufman had seen Bruce's classified CIA demonstration from 1969. The report that was never meant to leave Virginia somehow found its way to Tel Aviv. Kaufman forwarded it to his Mossad counterparts with a single annotation. This needs to be tested against Krav Maga. We need to know if these techniques have application in field operations. Avi Cohen received the report, read it 3 times. His response was dismissive. Movie star, Chinese acrobatics. Send the CIA my regards. But Kaufman persisted. The CIA report was specific. Documented. 8 operatives simultaneously. 23 seconds. Footage that the agency classified immediately because what it showed shouldn't have been possible. Avi read it again. He was a man who built his life on empirical testing. If the report was accurate, and the techniques deserved examination, if it was exaggerated, the examination would prove that. He made a request through proper channels. Bruce Lee was in Israel filming location footage for a documentary project. A quiet meeting could be arranged. Nothing official, no publicity. 2 martial arts practitioners from different systems, exploring whether their approaches had complementary applications. Bruce agreed, not because he needed to prove anything, because Krav Maga represented something his Jeet Kune philosophy valued above all else. Functional reality, a system built for actual combat rather than tradition or aesthetics. He wanted to understand it. The meeting was arranged for 6 in the morning. Before the facility officially opened, only 4 people would be present. Avi Cohen, 2 of his senior training instructors, a former military operatives named Reuven and Dahlia, and Bruce Lee. No audience, no witnesses beyond those 4. Avi didn't want it documented if the CIA report proved exaggerated. Bruce didn't want it publicized if it revealed gaps in his own system. The training room is concrete, no mats. Avi prefers concrete. Real fights don't happen on mats. The lighting is harsh and fluorescent. The room smells of sweat and antiseptic. On the walls, diagrams of pressure points, joint lock positions, weapon retention techniques. This isn't an art. It's a laboratory of human vulnerability. Bruce arrives at 5:58, 2 minutes early. He notices everything. The concrete floor, Avi's choice not to use mats, The diagrams, systematic anatomical focus, the absence of any traditional martial arts aesthetic, no bowing wall, no ceremonial equipment. Just a room designed for learning how to survive. Avi studies Bruce the same way. Small, 140 pounds at most. The CIA report said this man controlled 8 military operatives simultaneously. Avi has seen impressive demonstrations from skilled martial artists before. He remains skeptical, but he's here because he respects empirical evidence. They introduce themselves. Names only. No titles, no credentials. Avi speaks English with the clipped precision of someone who learned it for professional necessity. Bruce responds in English that carries traces of Hong Kong and Los Angeles. The report from Virginia. Avi begins. 8 operatives, 23 seconds. You controlled all of them without serious strikes. Demonstrated control, not combat. There's a difference. In field operations, a control and combat often need to be the same action. Our system is built on immediate incapacitation. No demonstrations, no education. Threat appears, threat is neutralized. Bruce nods. He respects this. Krav Maga's philosophy is correct. Real combat should end immediately. What I want to understand is whether your system addresses the space between threat identification and response. Avi's eyes sharpen. What space? The fraction of a second when a trained operative reads an opponent's intention before it becomes action. Interception timing. That space is where the fight can be decided before it begins. Reuven, one of Avi's instructors, crosses his arms. He's heard philosophical martial arts discussion before. It rarely translates into anything that works against someone trying to kill you. Gentlemen, Avi says, a cutting through the potential debate. Theory has limits. Let's test. He proposes a structured examination, not a fight. 3 scenarios, each designed to test specific claims about both systems. Avi will apply Krav Maga's core principles. Bruce will apply Jeet Kune's interception framework. They'll identify what works, what fails, and what each system might learn from the other. Scenario 1. Close-distance threat neutralization. AVI attempts to apply Krav Maga's signature choke from behind, the kind of attack that appears suddenly in field operations. Bruce must respond using Jeet Kune's sensitivity principles. Avi moves. His speed is exceptional. This isn't a slow demonstration. It's full-speed professional technique. His arm comes around Bruce's neck from behind. Solid grip. Professional application. Now Bruce feels the arm arrive. His response begins before the choke fully establishes. Not reaction, anticipation. The sensitivity training, thousands of hours of Chisao, the sticky hands drill that teaches practitioners to read force through touch, activates before conscious thought. His chin drops. His shoulder rises. The grip, which should have been catastrophic, finds itself working against partially protected structure. Bruce's elbow drives backward, not hard, positioned precisely against Avi's ribs, a demonstration of where a strike would go if this were real combat. Then his weight shifts. He uses Avi's grip as a leverage point. His body rotates inside the hold, turning the choke into a position where he's facing Avi at close range. His hand touches Avi's solar plexus. Light contact. Demonstration only. 3 seconds. Before we continue this classified encounter between 2 of the world's most lethal combat systems, if you're fascinated by these elite military and intelligence training stories, subscribe and turn on notifications. These are the encounters that intelligence agencies buried for decades because what they showed about hand-to-hand combat effectiveness challenged everything they'd been teaching. Now let's see what happened in that Tel Aviv training room. Avi steps back. He's processing. The choke should have established before any defense was possible. The speed of application was full professional tempo. But Bruce's response began, somehow, before the choke reached full position. How? You felt the approach, Avi says. Not a question. An observation. Muscle tension before motion. When you committed to the approach, your grip hand tensed fractionally first. That tension telegraphed direction. You read that in real time? With training, yes, not consciously. The body reads it directly. Avi looks at Reuven. This is exactly the kind of claim Krav Maga's empirical philosophy should test, not dismiss. He nods. Reuven sets up Scenario 2. Scenario 2. Multiple attacker protocols. Reuven and Dahlia approach simultaneously from different angles. Classic Krav Maga response involves immediate prioritization. Neutralize the nearest threat with maximum force. Create distance. Address secondary threat. Bruce's response involves something different. He doesn't prioritize the nearer threat. He moves to a position that makes both attackers' momentum work against each other. Reuven's approach from the left and Dahlia's from the right are each designed to create a crossfire that Bruce can't escape. Instead, Bruce positions himself at the intersection point where both attackers' trajectories create a gap. As Reuven and Dahlia converge, Bruce isn't in the space they're converging toward. His hands touch both of them briefly as they pass through the space where he was standing. 2 pressure point contacts, demonstrations of where strikes would have landed. You used our attack vectors against each other, Dahlia says. She's a former military intelligence officer. Her analytical mind is already processing implications. You forced our coordination to become our vulnerability. Your system excels at addressing threats in sequence, Bruce explains. Neutralize first, address second. But if someone understands that protocol, they can position themselves where the sequence breaks down. Avi holds up his hand. This is significant. In field operations, we train for sequential response because it's faster for individual operatives. But you're suggesting there's a positional awareness that makes sequencing unnecessary. Not unnecessary. Supplemented. Your sequential response is correct in most situations. What I'm showing is the exception. The case where an opponent understands your protocol. Avi has been in intelligence operations for 16 years. He has a particular skill for recognizing what's valuable and filtering out what isn't. What Bruce just demonstrated has direct operational application. If an opponent has been trained to anticipate Krav Maga's sequential protocol, and they can create positioning that defeats it. Scenario 3. Avi proposes it himself. This one comes from his personal experience, not a training scenario. A real situation he survived in 1967 during a field operation that remains classified. A situation where he was on the ground, arm partially controlled by an opponent, attempting to create the space and leverage to reverse position. Bruce listens to the setup. His interest is genuine. This is exactly what Jeet Kune needs. Contact with real combat scenarios, not training room abstractions. They work through the position. Ground fighting. Avi applies Krav Maga's ground escape protocols. Bruce observes, then demonstrates how pressure points can accelerate the escape. Know how nerve strikes against the controlling limb create momentary weakness that traditional ground escape protocols don't utilize. Reuven is on his feet, watching with the expression of someone whose professional assumptions are being systematically examined. He's not defensive, he's analytical. 20 years of Krav Maga training, and he's seeing techniques that his system doesn't address. Your pressure point work, he says to Bruce. In field operations, there are situations where we need to control without incapacitating. Suspects who need to be questioned. Situations where lethal response isn't authorized. Your nerve control techniques have direct application. Bruce nods. Krav Maga is built for lethal threat response, but intelligence operations sometimes need the opposite. Control without damage. Your system doesn't have that spectrum fully developed. And yours does? Wing Chun does. Jeet Kune inherits it. The ability to control an opponent's nervous system without destroying them, creating temporary incapacitation, compliance, repositioning, without permanent harm. Avi has been listening to this exchange with particular attention. He's the senior instructor. He evaluates what his system does and doesn't do with professional objectivity, because he knows something Reuven doesn't. He knows about a situation coming in 3 months, an operation where Mossad operatives need to extract information from an individual who cannot be harmed, where control without damage is exactly the operational requirement. He looks at Bruce. Would you be willing to spend 3 days here? Is teaching those specific techniques to our instructors? Bruce considers. He's leaving Israel in 4 days. 3 days of teaching here would be possible. On one condition. I want 3 days of Krav Maga instruction in return, specifically your ground fighting protocols and weapon disarming sequences. There are gaps in Jeet Kune's ground game that your system addresses. Avi extends his hand. Integration. Bruce shakes it. Integration. Subscribe and turn on notifications because we have more intelligence agency and military encounters coming that prove Bruce Lee revolutionized how elite operatives thought about hand-to-hand combat. Drop a comment about what surprised you most. Now let's see what happened during those 3 days. The 3-day exchange that followed was conducted in complete secrecy. No documentation. And no outside observers. 4 people in a concrete training room, dismantling and reconstructing 2 of the world's most effective combat systems. Bruce taught pressure point control, nerve strikes that created compliance without damage, Chisao sensitivity drills adapted for field operation scenarios, how to read intention through touch, how to maintain control of a larger opponent without continuous strength application. Avi and his instructors taught ground fighting from the Krav Maga perspective, not competition grappling, field survival ground fighting, how to get off the ground in the shortest possible time, weapon access from compromised positions, escape from pins applied by opponents with significant size advantages. The cross-pollination was extraordinary. Then Krav Maga's directness combined with Jeet Kune's sensitivity created something neither system contained independently. Bruce left with ground escape sequences he would integrate into Jeet Kune's curriculum. Avi's instructors left with nerve control techniques they would classify and add to specific operational training protocols. On the morning of the 3rd day, Avi and Bruce sat on the concrete floor of the empty training room. The others had gone for breakfast. 2 systems, 2 philosophies, 2 practitioners from completely different worlds, sharing tea in a room that didn't exist on any map. Your system, Avi says. Jeet Kune. It's not really a system. No, Bruce agrees. It's a philosophy for building a system. Each practitioner absorbs from everything effective, discards what isn't, and builds something personal and functional. That's accurate. Krav Maga is similar in origin. It was built by Emi Lichtenfeld from street fighting, boxing, wrestling, and judo. Whatever worked. No tradition, just effectiveness. Then we started from the same principle, Bruce says. We arrived at different answers because we were solving different problems. Krav Maga solves the problem of immediate lethal threat. Jeet Kune solves the problem of any threat, in any context, against any opponent. Can those 2 solutions be combined? Bruce is quiet for a moment. He's thinking about something specific, about something he's been working on for years. The idea that martial arts as a concept needs to evolve beyond specific systems, that the future is integration. Not combined, integrated. Combination is mixing ingredients. What integration is cooking them into something new. What you do with the techniques you learned this week. What I do with the ground fighting I learned. We don't just add them to what we already do. We let them change how we think. Avi understands this. It's how intelligence agencies evolve, not by adding new information to old frameworks, by letting new information change the framework itself. You've changed how we'll train here, Avi says, not sentimentally, just accurately. Specific protocols are now inadequate for specific situations. We need to address that. And you've changed how I teach ground fighting. I've been avoiding it because I believed Jeet Kune should never allow engagement to reach the ground. You showed me that sometimes it does, and there should be a prepared response. 4 days after Bruce left Israel, Adalia sent a classified report to Mossad's training division. The report recommended incorporating nerve control protocols into specific operational training curricula. The techniques were classified under a designation that roughly translates as controlled incapacitation methods. They remain classified to this day. Bruce returned to Hong Kong, where he was preparing for what would become his final films. He integrated Krav Maga's ground survival principles into his personal training. His notebooks from 1972 contain specific references to Israeli ground fighting methodology, though he never named the source publicly. The encounter in Tel Aviv had no official documentation, no report filed under any intelligence agency's standard process. The only record is in Dalia's classified recommendation report and Bruce's private training notebooks. 4 people knew what happened. None spoke publicly about it during Bruce's lifetime. When Bruce died in July 1973, Avi Cohen was in the middle of a field operation that would later be connected to the aftermath of the Munich Olympics. He heard the news through an intelligence channel. He was silent for a long time. Then he told the operative next to him something that captured everything about those 3 days in Tel Aviv. There was a man, small man. He could read your intention before you acted. He understood combat the way a musician understands music, not notes, feeling. Avi paused. He showed me that my system, as good as it is, was only one language in a conversation that has many languages, where I'm still learning the others. The techniques Bruce taught in Tel Aviv survived through Dalia's curriculum work. She integrated nerve control into Mossad's non-lethal protocols. Over time, those techniques spread through Israeli security training, adapted, modified, but tracing back to 3 days in a concrete room that doesn't appear on any map. The techniques Avi's team taught Bruce survived differently, through Bruce's notebooks, through the students he taught in his final year, through the writing he was completing about Jeet Kune's philosophy of functional effectiveness, fragments of Krav Maga, ground survival thinking, woven invisibly into Jeet Kune's developing theory. 2 systems, 3 days, an encounter that neither organization could officially acknowledge, and both were changed by. In Avi Cohen retired from Mossad in 1984. He spent the remainder of his career teaching at a private security training facility in the United States. He never spoke about Tel Aviv publicly, but former students describe a characteristic moment in his teaching. When students argued about which martial arts system was superior, Avi would stop them with a single question. Superior for what situation? Against what opponent? With what constraints? Systems don't fight. People fight. The person who can adapt what they know to what they're facing will always defeat the person locked into one approach. His students assumed this was standard instructor wisdom. Those who knew his history understood it differently. It was the philosophy of a man who had spent 3 days testing the limits of his own system against someone who had transcended the concept of system entirely. Tel Aviv, 1972. No maps, no documentation, no official record. Just 2 combat systems at the highest level of development, testing themselves against each other in a concrete room, finding what worked, finding what didn't, finding that the questions each system asked were more similar than the answers they'd arrived at. What emerged from those 3 days wasn't combination, it was integration. The recognition that effectiveness in combat, whether intelligence field operation or the broader reality of human confrontation, requires the humility to admit your system has gaps and the courage to fill them from whatever source offers the best answer. Now, Bruce Lee spent his career asking one question: what works? In Tel Aviv, he found people who had been asking the same question from a different starting point. And for 3 days, in a room that doesn't exist, they shared what they'd learned.